The United Nations General Assembly last year adopted January the 24th as World International Day of Education. This initiative was born out of the need to acknowledge and celebrate the role of education in nurturing peace and promoting societal development in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, as the world marks the first ever International Day of Education, of course Nigeria inclusive, we will be reviewing the status of the Nigerian education system and its role in promoting peace and national development. The question is how Nigeria can continually leverage on the benefits of educating its citizens in ensuring significant improvements in health, stimulating economic growth and unlocking the potential of Nigerians across board, is one of the questions we'll attempt to answer on the program. Gender parity in education as a catalyst for breaking out of the cycle of poverty is also another aspect we'll be addressing on this platform. This is Nigeria Today. Our guests will be revealed in just a moment. My name is Dennis Adigunloye. Welcome to the program. Right, Mustafa Al-Hassan is the Program Lead Policy Education and Research of the NIM Foundation. He joins me in the studio. Welcome to Nigeria Today.
Thank you so much, Dennis, for having me.
All right, also joining us in this discussion is Samira Ibrahim. She is the Program Lead Heroines of Peace, also of the NIM Foundation. Thank you also for joining us on Nigeria Today. Okay, then let's get started. As I alluded to in my intro, the United Nations General Assembly last year adopted January the 24th as World International Day of Education. Let me come to Samira first. What do you think informed this decision by the UN to earmark a day to highlight the significance of education?
First of all, I have to commend the UN for doing that.
Yeah.
Education, I think, is the most, if not the most important aspect of any nation, developing or developed. Their decision to highlight it further emphasizes its role in developing a nation, like you said, in the peace and security of every nation. I think it's very, everyone's mind is important. So the role of education, the role education has to play is a significant role in any society. So highlighting it at that level puts the emphasis on it. And I guess for Nigeria, here in Nigeria, it puts more of an emphasis for us because we haven't been doing the best we can be doing and there's still so much work to be done. So I think it's great that we're able to highlight such a day, also as a reminder for all nations how important the day is and the subject matter is.
Okay, Mustafa, just give us your take on education in Nigeria. Would you say you're satisfied with how things have progressed in recent years?
Well, just a little what Samira said, it's very important. The role that education plays in nation building and in the well-being of an individual cannot be overemphasized, and as such, that's why essentially we're having this discussion. You did ask if I was happy with the status quo of education in Nigeria. Frankly speaking, I mean, every well-meaning Nigerian out there would say absolutely no. At the moment, not only are we the country with the highest number of people who are poor, but equally we have the highest number of children that are out of school. And if you look holistically at the development indices of Nigeria, you could clearly draw a correlation between the lack of access to education as to also why so many people are in the cycle of poverty in Nigeria.
All right, well, given the vast expanse that is Nigeria, almost 200 million people, would you say that this enhancing the education sector in the country is not solely a responsibility of government?
Entirely not. I mean, that's some of the things civil society organizations and non-profits like NIM Foundation essentially do. So we also believe that it's very, very important that not just individuals but equally corporate bodies come together and contribute significantly to education. I'll give a quick example. The Safe School Initiative that essentially came about after the the kidnap of the Chibok girls was essentially an initiative that was moved by philanthropists and media moguls in Nigeria, and then it was picked up, and then they work with corporate bodies as well as government institutions. So to put it more accurately, the entirety of the education sector, and as well as so many other development areas in Nigeria, is not necessarily just the responsibility of just the government, private individuals, civil society organizations, and everyone essentially has a role to play.
Okay, let me get your take, Samira. How can let's say the private sector and then NGOs assist governments in unburdening this enormous task of educating the entire nation?
First of all, I don't think it's the role of just the government. I think Nigeria has too many people, way too many people for the government to handle. And I think that's maybe one of the problems. We're not looking at what role the other sectors have. The private sector has a huge role to play. They already play a big role in opening universities, secondary schools, primary schools. It goes down the chain. But I think a lot of the time we put a lot of emphasis on the government. What can the government do? But it's not just the government. Nigeria is way too big for the government to focus on the education sector. I think it will take holding hands with all the different sectors, including the international community, and putting our efforts, collating our efforts as one to tackle the issues with education. I think educating people, getting people in the classroom is not just the issue. It's the what are people getting out of the classroom? What is going into their minds? Like we saw Kaduna State just did an evaluation of teachers, and they found out that, I can't say the percentage off the top of my head, but a lot of the teachers were not educated enough to be teaching
Those subjects.
So it's not just the fact of getting the kids in the school, but what are they coming out with?
Right. Okay, let's just digress a little from the classroom. Education is not just about, learning different subjects. There's education on the parental level. So what would you say is the role of the parents in terms of educating their children and wards?
Like you said, I don't believe education is just for the classroom. Education essentially starts at home. It starts with your socialization. At the beginning you spoke about the role of education in peace and security. If you grow up in a household where it's segregated, and from your early years socialization you're taught that there's diversity in Nigeria, immediately you go into the classrooms like that. I think parents have the foundational role of education. It's your, not just ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, but it's your role to socialize your child in the right way. So like you said, education isn't in the classroom, it's socialization, it's how you behave, it's how you act towards people. And I think that might be the base of our problems as well. We're not looking at education in all aspects. We're looking at it like numeracy and literacy, which it doesn't stay at that. It's so much more, as we've found out with our work in the field.
All right, Mustafa, let's go back into the classrooms. Samira brought up a crucial point there, where a lot of teachers are teaching subjects that they may not necessarily be qualified to teach. Surely this is not the best way forward in terms of educating or giving the youth, children, the best level of education possible.
Okay, I think most times when people talk about the decay in education, especially in Nigeria, we talk about it in isolation. We do not talk about it in the full context that a whole host of other sectors in Nigeria are, for example, in suffering from a lot of decay. So, for example, maybe the civil service, and essentially at any broad level that you look at. So education in Nigeria essentially has been, the problem with education has a ripple effect on the society, and that ripple effect is essentially what we are seeing. And back to Samira's point about the quality of teaching staff, but just before that, a lot of times when people talk about education, it's quick to say and allude that, oh, we need quality classrooms, we need access, we need this. People do not just stop, pause and think, are we actually educating the children in the Nigerian space with relevant skills in the 21st century? Are we taking taking into cognizance their creativity? Are we taking into cognizance the social and emotional learning needs of these children? So, for example, some of on one of the initiatives that I lead at NIM Foundation, one of the things that we do is to equally provide psychological support to our beneficiaries who are victims of the insurgency. So you have to put into context a lot of the issues that that kids go through, or beneficiaries or people who are actually receiving education, and then you have to put that side by side with what's obtainable in the 21st century. Whatever we're teaching our children in the classrooms today has to be essentially useful in the next generation. Because this morning I saw the Kaduna State Governor who was mentioning that his children do not even know what a typewriter is, and then in a lot of in the school curriculum, for instance, and that's an entire issue that we should have to just address. The type of curriculum that we teach is outdated.
Yeah. So there's certainly a lot of variables that come into play when it comes to quality education. We'll continue our discussion shortly, but you are watching Nigeria Today, and we are taking a look at education as a catalyst for peace and national development. We'll now take a break from the studio and hear what Nigerians have to say on this issue.
I think in the area of provision of facilities, most schools, if you go, some of the buildings are not in order. The things for teaching and learning, they are not there. Are you getting me? There are schools, even in this city, where you go, within not too far from the city center, you notice that some students are still laying under trees. The classrooms are not enough, and that is not speaking good for us. So we need serious improvement. And teachers are the builders of the society. They bring up the young ones. They train even the matured ones. So they are supposed to be paid well and even on time. So these are the areas I feel we should retouch.
So our children's NYC, our engineers, pharmacists, professionals, they are coming out. They are in offices for NYC, and other young ones are coming up. I see them shining bright and having focus. That's
I think that we have been experiencing since I was in primary school. I went to secondary school, free education, everything. I don't think if that thing can come back, it will improve our educational background now. More especially starting with the primary school feeding, some of the states that they have embarked in doing it, it will curtail a certain problem with the parents, which is a great development educationally wise.
Is the crux of life. Without education, we are nowhere. We are developing from one stage to now we are in computer age. Those days are gone. So we must educate our children, even our elders. It's not too late for them to go and educate themselves on their fields.
Everybody now want to send the children to school. When you look around now, you find out that education is the most important thing. If you are not educated, you are in problem. Because in time coming, maybe in years to come, if you are not educated, you have problem. So I advise parents, please, to try harder and train their children. When you talk about, in our own time, they say they should leave women and train men. But you find out now, we are not God. Because maybe that woman might be a blessing to that family. The men's side, all of them might be trying harder, they will not get anything. But the women's side, you will see that woman moving well. So we are not the one to decide, it's God. So even though you have money, I will advise you to train all of them. All of them is good. But training only men, leaving women, I don't support that.
Right, if you're just tuning in, the program is Nigeria Today, and we are looking at education, a catalyst for peace and national development. And still with me in the studio is Mustafa Al-Hassan and Samira Ibrahim, both of the NIM Foundation. Coming to you again, Samira, you heard some of the comments of some members of the public there. Just give us your take on their understanding and assessment of education and the importance of it.
I think a lot of them were spot on. It is very important, like a lot of them highlighted, and there was a man talking about how before we used to educate the men and we used to leave the women out, and it has caused problems in today's world as you grow older. Highlighting on that, I think that trend has started to shift, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Would you say that education of the girl child is paramount to, you know, let's say, tackling various challenges that the country in Nigeria in particular are facing, let's say, with regards to security and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I do think so. With educating everyone, the numbers right now is 10.5 out of school children. Of that, over 60% are girls. I think you can't educate half your nation. And you can't leave half out. You have to carry on and leaving no one behind. If we have, we've seen the trends, we've seen the news. It's not just men causing trouble in Nigeria and with insurgency. Women are doing it too. If we don't have an educated nation in its entirety, there's no way we can move forward together. One side will always bring us down. It's the same way with, like, should we leave the North behind? Should we leave the South behind? We have to go together. It's the same with female and male. You can't leave one part of the puzzle. Otherwise, the whole puzzle will never be done. It's
an all-inclusive affair. Mustafa, just give us your take on what you heard from some members of the public there.
I think there's a universal agreement about the importance of education. I also had a lot of people discussing about the quality of education and some of the issues that I raised about not just building infrastructure, but also the importance of the quality of education. Just to add to Samira's point about the issues of gender and education, that disparity. If for anything you do not want to educate girls in your country, it makes total economic sense to do that. And I'll just give you a little breakdown. So in Nigeria, we have the highest number of school children, and Samira just mentioned we have 60% of that number. Now also, Nigeria, 60% of women in Nigeria are also poor. So you can just make a correlation between women who do not attend school, and then how a lot of that in the long run contributes to a lot of poor people. So essentially, if you want to reduce poverty in your country, start first by putting more girls in school.
All right. In terms of rural education, this seems to be a challenge for successive governments. What role has culture and religion, in your view, played in mitigating the potential threat of uneducated Nigerians in the rural areas?
Okay, so not to digress, but then the biggest misconception across board today is that local communities are not accepting of education. Local communities do not want kids to go to school. I work in a lot of these communities, and I can assure you, they are very receptive of children going to school. In local communities, you find parents are actually more interested in attending parent-teachers meetings and things like that. If you go into a lot of rural communities in Nigeria, you see that parents contribute infrastructure. In some communities, parents actually do some sort of association and pay teacher salaries where government is found wanting. However, this is not to say that there are no cultural issues or norms that affect people from going to school, issues of gender again, and the fact that maybe a certain gender should be educated over another gender, and so many issues. However, what we fail to realize is the fact that government, as well as other actors, like you did mention earlier, have a multifold of roles to play in essentially getting a lot of these communities to open up and provide things like access to education, because there are so many issues that affect children from going to school. And we talk about school enrollment, we forget to talk about school retention. So in Nigeria, for instance, we have one of the highest dropout rates, especially of girls in school. Why are we not addressing those issues, especially in rural communities? So for instance, if you have a school in community A, and it takes I know a lot of people in the older generation will also tell you that they walked about 4 to 5 kilometers, if not more. Why should that? How can that child essentially come into a classroom and actually concentrate? So a lot of these issues are all interrelated. There are intersections between these issues that that local communities face. A lot of studies have shown that if you solve issues surrounding poverty and trying to, especially inequalities in local communities, you will solve issues that have to do with cultural misconceptions as well as religion, the role that it has to play in educating children.
Oh, so it's not necessarily a lack of enthusiasm on the part of people. It's more a case of circumstances that militate against that interest. All right, Samira, the school feeding program initiative by the present administration, from all indications, has inspired parents to have more interest in taking their children and wards to school. What other strategies would you say Nigeria can employ in encouraging formal education?
First of all, I have to commend the social intervention program, it's called. I was reading the statistics, and they're feeding over 9 million children daily in school. I don't know if they've done the research to see the percentage of increase, but there is a significant increase in school attendance. First of all, like Mustafa was saying, there's the things that affect kids going to school. Feeding is one. Like he said, if you walk 5 kilometers with nothing in your stomach, there's no way you're going to learn. So they've addressed one in talking about the partnerships we were talking about before. So the federal government, I think the presidency is doing the school feeding program. They've done one part. I think a really important thing for us to do is to listen. With our program, we've gone into the communities and we've seen what makes the kids not go to school. I think with every community is completely different, the north, south, east and west. We have to listen. Every community is different. So for instance, with one of our programs, we saw that things like transportation was an issue, like he mentioned. Just solving that by putting a school bus, of course we can't do that in all communities, but those little things like putting a school, you have to start somewhere. Like so we started with feeding. I can't tell you what we could do overall, because I think we've done it so often where we've put a blanket rule across the whole of Nigeria. It doesn't work. There are some things that don't work. I think we have to start listening. If you go to certain parts of the country, they have to have religious education, and that triumphs what we call the Western education, the ABCs. The Arabic education is more important. If you want to solve things like that, it's listening to them. What would they do to partner both? I think we have an issue of not listening and just applying blanket rules across board. So listening would be first.
Okay, well, it's been an interesting discussion. Unfortunately, time is against us. I'd like to appreciate Mustafa Al-Hassan, the Program Lead, Policy Education and Research of the NIM Foundation, and Samira Ibrahim, who is the Program Lead, Heroines of Peace, also of the NIM Foundation. Thank you both for your insights on this very topical issue.
All right, thank you so much.
And we thank you to our viewers for watching. And remember, you can watch this or any other episode online at www.youtube.com/NTA News 24 Hub. My name is Dennis Adignwe. Thanks for watching. Thank you very much.